It's time for Bringing the Heat with Trey Lyle.
Welcome on into another edition of Bringing the Heat with Trey Lyle. I'm, of course, Trey Lyle. Fun show planned for you. Caleb Barnes will join me a little bit later on, talk the latest news and notes in all of NASCAR. Our soundbite of the week will be the focus of Alex Bowman, and we'll, of course, have some great insight for you. But first, starting something interesting here for the next couple of weeks on Bringing the Heat. We're going to talk to friends of Front Stretch, you could call it, people you may or may not have heard on Happy Hour, my former, podcast, the other podcast, of course, one of the other podcasts, great podcast here on the Front Stretch Podcast Network. But one of the, I think he is still outside, and I'm not counting Davey Siegel, who, was a fill-in co-host with Dalton while Dalton was away. But I think as a actual guest, I think he still has the record for most times appeared on Happy Hour, if I'm not mistaken, is John Newby from Savage Ventures. So, we had a really fun conversation, and it was about racing, leaving the Pacific Northwest. If you didn't know, John Newby is an Oregon native, and then his journey. I mean, he has some quite interesting stuff about covering college football at Oregon State to his time working as a sign designer, as well as at a camp where he basically was a handyman, and what he's doing now and why he likes the challenge. So John Newby, now our focus as he heads into the Inferno.
Now it's time for
From fanbuzz.com, because that is the name they are going with, at John Newby _ is John Newby.
To go into the Inferno with Trey.
Typically, you hear this man on Happy Hour spewing, I think smart opinions, better than any what we gave during that time. But his seat is a little bit warm because he's now into the Inferno. We're doing a special series for the next couple of weeks. We're getting some friends of Front Stretch, I like to call them, guys who have been on Happy Hour or former Front Stretch alum, and talking about their journey and how they're in motorsports so you can learn more about them. So joining us now from fanbuzz.com, because that is the name they are going with, at John Newby _ is John Newby. Newby, good to see you, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Let's dive in. Before we dive into your career, you are a Oregon native. That's where you grew up, and so I think you're probably the number one expert when it comes to this, especially because it ties your two worlds together. I think you and Gluck, and even Brian to some degree.
Oh, yeah.
But racing leaving the Pacific Northwest, obviously it was short-lived in Portland. NASCAR leaving Portland. How bad do you think NASCAR is treating that market? And ultimately, long term, do you think there's an answer outside of maybe like a street race in like a Denver?
I mean, as far as the long term goes, I don't know what the best option is, because I know that they said Portland it needed some updating to host like a Cup Series race. But the people out there growing up, lived in Oregon for 30 years and then lived in Montana for 3 years, where like generations of my grandparents are from. There are some diehard just motorsports fans in general, but also some diehard NASCAR fans. Because there were times where I'd fly down to Phoenix to cover championship week, and it'd be me on a plane full of like Hendrick Motorsports fans, all decked out in different like crew shirts and hats for Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Kyle Larson, William Byron, all these different people. So there's an audience up there. And having that race, the Xfinity race, just taken away from them suddenly, it's not ideal. And I know that they're not happy about it, just because finally getting racing back there. I mean, there's an ARCA West race that's in Eastern Washington, but that's not really the same thing. They're desperately starved for some NASCAR races out there.
And IndyCar, who announced their schedule, is still going to Portland, which is a positive thing. Ultimately, do you put the blame in NASCAR? It feels like if you look at all the areas of the country, at least like all but the Pacific Northwest are at least getting something. Obviously, the South is getting the heavy, but you mentioned Phoenix, that's the Southwest. San Diego is Southern, Southern California in the West, and then you have a few races in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic. Ultimately, it feels like, I mean, if you look at the history of NASCAR in general, the Pacific Northwest has been, I guess, the area that's been neglected the most by NASCAR.
Yeah, and They are the decision makers, so they're the only people you can really blame in this scenario, because I know Ben Kennedy has said he gets asked directly every time a schedule announcement comes out, "Hey, when are you guys gonna go to Seattle or take Cup Series to Portland? When are you gonna go to Denver? When are you gonna go back to the Pacific Northwest in full force?" And he always says, "It's very high on our priority list. We really want to make this happen." But then years and years and years, nothing's happened. So I'm sure there are things behind the scenes with just different, municipalities they have to work out deals with, or finding tracks, all these different things they have to overcome, but they are the ones ultimately making that decision.
For fans who don't know the racing in the Pacific Northwest, like what would do you have an idea outside of obviously Portland, the
Hmm.
any idea of like a track that could possibly work?
I mean, not particularly. Like I said, there is Tri-Cities Raceway in, like the area that is Kennewick, Pasco, and Richland, Washington. It's a short track. It is not really, I guess not super NASCAR worthy as far as hosting with the infrastructure. A lot of the motorsports people out in Oregon, they'll go to there's some small tracks out in like Grass Valley, Oregon, but that's more for, your weekend enthusiasts, your motorcycles, that sort of thing. Rally is really big out in Oregon, but a lot of people, they'll go up on the mountains and do like what they call autocross, where they'll, set up a bunch of cones in like a huge parking lot and then race their weekend rides around trying to post the fastest time. They were trying to build a racetrack, I believe it was in Eastern Oregon, like the Hepner area, if I remember correctly, but that ultimately fell through. And so they need something out there. So Portland is the best option for existing structures.
Fascinating. See, I don't even know any of this. Like I rely on you and Brian to let me know about this. But yeah, definitely an area. But let's talk about you again. This is a little bit of a mini series, and we're gonna talk about their career paths to where they are today. Obviously, John Newby works with fanbuzz.com as the senior writer, basically covering all of NASCAR for them. But he's
Hmm.
covered a lot of different things. He covered college football. We talked about that the other day offline, and then the
Yep.
NFL, video games, pop
Yeah.
culture. It seems like you've had your hand and feet in a little bit of everything. Let's start. So you mentioned you're Oregon native. When was the moment you realized, hey, motor like growing up, were you a motorsports fan? Like, did you like NASCAR as a kid, and then, or was this something that you grew to kind of fall in love with as you got more and more into the career path?
I grew to fall in love with NASCAR. I was a motorsports fan. Like I was the perfect age to where like when Nitro Circus hit, that was huge. I got to watch like Carrie Hart do a bunch of motocross races in person, and because for some reason they came to a small town in Oregon where I lived. Got to go like some monster truck rallies, got to see some rally stuff. Like there was motorsports around. Lots of drag racing too, but not NASCAR obviously like we've just talked about. It just wasn't there. So my first introduction, bad enough, was like a late '90s Jeff Foxworthy comedy special where he talked about Jeff Gordon, and I was like, I don't even know what this is, so I had to go look it up. And so obviously as years progressed, I got more and more into the sport itself, to where I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then when I finally got the opportunity to cover it professionally, I'm like, this is perfect timing, because now I'm starting to get really into the sport, starting to learn a lot more about it. Like there's still so much more I had to learn when I got that first opportunity to cover the Daytona 500, but I had like a decent foundation.
So you start out your career in Oregon. Obviously, you cover the Beavers or
Yep.
of Oregon State. Shout out to the Beavs.
Get your act together.
Hey, if you're a NASCAR fan, you probably have seen the Beavs at least a little bit. Whether it's right before the Xfinity race or right after the Xfinity race,
It's true.
during football season. But why did you pick? Like, was that just because that was kind of the local team? It was either Oregon or Oregon State, and then it kind of how did you land? I guess your start in sports writing.
So I wanted to be a writer when I was, like a senior in high school. All my friends were smart and went off to go do like computer programming and all these crazy lucrative deals. One of my friends would become a doctor. I'm not smart in that way.
Same.
So I really enjoyed writing though. Like our high school teacher would make us take a news story and, rewrite it and tell it our own way without, plagiarizing or anything like that. And that was just always super fascinating. And so I really was into the idea of, writing about sports or reviewing video games because both industries I find endlessly fascinating. And I got a chance to do freelance for both of them when I was, in college and immediately after college. But as far as the NASCAR part of it, getting this gig to write about NASCAR actually happened accidentally because when I had the opportunity to write about Oregon State, I had a friend who was like, "Hey, we need someone who can pitch in, who knows sports. Can you, show up at this pro day, this practice, interview these players?" I was like, "Yeah, I can do that." So I got to go write about the Beavers when they were in the small area where I lived, which is about 2.5, 3 hours away from their actual stadium. And that, helped me build some connections within the industry. And I was like, "Oh, this is really fun. I love talking to these people up close and personal." Whereas video games, it's a lot of, "Hey, read this press release, write a news story, or review this video game and don't sleep while you're reviewing it." I really like the person to person aspect of sports writing as opposed to the video game aspect.
Was there a moment at Oregon State that you remember vividly as kind of like a, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here moment?
Well, there's a few of those.
Yeah.
So I think the most fascinating part when I was covering them, because I was working for like Beaver Blitz, which is part of the 24/7 Sports CBS Sports Network. I was covering a lot when Gary Anderson was the head coach. So, like Mike Riley had gone off to Nebraska and they were trying to find someone. So they brought in Anderson, who was a huge name, and we're like, "Oh man, this guy, he's gonna come and transform Oregon State." And like their first season, they're okay. They're fine. They gave him a bunch of money, but then like he just quit. Like he had multi-year deal and he's just like, "Nah, I'm good," and just like gave back a bunch of the money and then just quit. And the follow-up from that was just so bizarre that I'll never forget. Like, meeting him in person and interviewing him a couple times was an experience in itself. But then also, the way that the dude just like left was just such a weird situation. I mean, it helped us get Jonathan Smith, who was a former quarterback for the Beavers, who, played with Ocho Cinco and Hushmanzada and had like he has like highlight worthy bowl games. But man, yeah, just that whole Gary Anderson era was just such a weird vibe.
So we transition that into you work more for CBS and 247 Sports and the NFL side.
Yeah.
And then eventually you land at becoming a NASCAR writer
Yeah.
at Heavy. How did the transition go from the football side of things to where you found your home, and which was the NASCAR side, which you've been doing now since 2021? And
Yeah, I started in 2020, like kind of on a half and half basis when I was
mhm,
still worked at CBS, and then full time since 21. Sorry, I didn't mean to
mhm.
interrupt you there.
No, you're fine. I'm basing it off your LinkedIn account, so it's your fault. Um, so
Perfect.
but what led you to that path where NASCAR, you're like, "Oh, I wanna go cover NASCAR," because, I mean, covering the NFL, it's the NFL, like, it's the big leagues, but,
Mhm.
you kind of transitioned into this role with NASCAR.
So that was a little bit of a bitter time in my life. So when I was doing the freelance work for Beaver Blitz, writing for the Oregon State while still, working full time in the sign industry, and then also at one point working at a campground repairing docks and doing maintenance on.
Well, we're gonna talk about that.
Okay,
We're
perfect.
just gonna wait to the end. That was my
All right,
I would
sweet.
save the good stuff for the
Just
end.
setting the background. So I got hired full time by 24/7 Sports because the lady who owns Beaver Blitz recommended me because they were looking for NFL writers. I got hired in October of 2018. So my wife and I packed up, moved cross country to Nashville, to where they had all of us working out of this central 24/7 Sports office in Brentwood, Tennessee. And so they had me, writing about like primarily the Texans and the Raiders during the Antonio Brown Raiders fiasco. And so that was a really cool, like, that was 8 months getting to work in, like, the first professional newsroom with all these different, college writers plus NFL writers. We were all just jam-packed together. But then the guy who owned the site decided in May 2019 that he was just gonna can all of the professional writers. So all of the NBA, all of the NFL, he was just like, "Yeah, we're not gonna cover this on 24/7 Sports anymore. We're all gonna do college only, so you're all not gonna have a job in 2 weeks." And so they had opportunities at CBS proper to where we could interview for them, but they were only hiring 3 people, and there was 12 to 15 NFL writers on staff. And so I obviously was not one of the ones who was hired by CBS proper. But another CBS website, popculture.com, which is, celebrity news, movie news, all that stuff, they wanted to do a little bit of sports writing. And so they brought in myself and then a guy who covered the Packers for 24/7 Sports. And they're like, "Hey, let's see what you can do. We just want to do all sports." So, we basically started with the basics: football, basketball, wrestling, golf, base I think it's a baseball, all those kind of random ones. And then when the 2020 Daytona 500 came around, they're like, "Hey, we should probably cover this because A, we've heard this NASCAR thing is big, and B, that's also the first race where Trump was going to show up to do like the Grand Marshal." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can cover it. That's fine." And so I covered that race. It went huge, like did massive numbers for us because obviously the 2020 Daytona 500 was insanity anyway. And so my boss was like, "Okay, keep doing some more of this NASCAR stuff." So I just started kind of like plugging away at it, and then um, a couple different people from NASCAR proper called me and were like, "Hey, do you just want to interview some of these drivers? Like, we've seen that you started doing some coverage. We can, hook you up with some interviews." I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to." So I got to interview Ty Dillon, Garrett Smithley, and then Kurt Busch in like the first, I don't know, 3 months that I covered the sport. And after talking to those 3 dudes, I was like, "Oh, while I love football and I love that sport itself, the difference between the personalities in NASCAR and the, I guess, refined and polished NFL or college football players is staggering. Like, you can have fun back and forth conversations. You can have, like honest to God interviews, whereas a lot of the NFL stuff is like, "Hey, I hope I did well at my pro day. I hope I get drafted. Love my family. Thank God. Cool." And you don't really get anything. And like, I get that. That's part of the NFL. That's part of the football training. But especially in like 2020, I mean, when I started doing this, the players or the drivers were just so much fun to talk to. 'Cause, I mean, like, I talked to Ty Dillon about just pasta and random cooking and stuff, as well as racing. And then, Kurt Busch was telling me about how he was butt dialing the wrong person, trying to like set up an interview, and it was some like 79-year-old grandma, and she had no idea what he was talking about. And so I was like, "This is so much fun." Like, the action on the track is really fun to cover. The personalities are great, and I just like went all in on it because it was so much more enjoyable to me.
So you go in, you join heavy.com. That's when
Yep.
you unfortunately met Michael Massey and Dalton Hopkins,
Those guys, I
and Brian
swear.
Nolan. This is before I joined Front Stretch. Then you met me, and it got a lot better. And then obviously, you as I've said before on Happy Hour, when you were one time part of NBC Sports, they had to have since you bring a big bill, they picked you over Dale Earnhardt Jr. Um,
Happens to the best of
all I
us.
gotta say is he joined and Dale left like about a month or two apart. And then I want to get to your latest adventure uh in a moment.
Yeah.
But what was was there a race in particular? Was there an interview? You mentioned the Kurt Busch interview where I don't say clicked is the right word, or where you kind of like, I don't say it was like the welcome to NASCAR moment, because like for me the example was like like welcome to NASCAR moment was the Ty Gibbs Sam Mayer fight. Like I
Oh
got
yeah.
a video of that, and just like it's one of the few times I've covered a sporting event where I just know everything that happened.
Hmm.
Another is interviewing Dale Jr. like at post race, just because he was my favorite driver as a kid, and like the fact that I'm like 5 feet from him, like, and the first time I ever interacted with him in my life, I said like 3 words to him, and it was at a mall in Richmond, Virginia. But
Yeah.
in terms of an actual moment coverage, like, I think that to me was the moment, um, like, where I truly clicked, like, "Oh my g like, you're in it. You're like, you have to like, you're in this." Was there that kind of moment for you? I don't wanna say welcome to NASCAR moment, but, like, the moment where it's like, "Oh boy, here we go."
I mean, so I don't have one as cool as the, Sam Mayer Ty Gibbs fight, because your first fight that you could cover is great, but mine was like my second or third season whenever, Ross Chastain punched Noah Gragson, because I was there at Kansas for that. But I think the first moment that it hit me and how different it was from college football in particular was because of, all the different COVID rules, all that different stuff. The first race I got to cover in person where I was fully credentialed was the 2021 Nashville weekend, where they, went back Nashville Super Speedway. It was a huge thing. Finally Cup Series race at Nashville for the first time. Xfinity and trucks are back here. And I got to be there and getting to go. Well, that was the weekend that Colleague bought 2 charters, announced that Justin Haley was going to be full-time driver. And so that was just super big news anyway. And being able to be there for that was great. But going and doing the pit road, like, that was my first experience with the bullpen, and talking to Ross Chastain after he finished, second or whatever it was. And that was his best finish in the Ganassi car. And seeing like how that whole process worked and how it's so different than, like a college football bullpen, where they're like, oh, you can't talk to these players because they're too young, or you can't talk to this quarterback because of so and so reason, whatever.
Or they won't even let you in the locker room. They'll just
Exactly.
it's a press conference.
That too. But then having access to, like, Ross and just all these different people, and getting to field just different questions, and actually getting to ask him, just random questions about like that run that he had. I was like, okay, this is like, the other writers let me get some questions in, but like B, this is, my first time getting to be in like a NASCAR true bullpen after, the tip top Cup Series race. I mean, obviously Kyle Larson dominated, so it was kind of a snoozer, but it was still such a cool and memorable experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very similar to like the first time doing it. Before we get to your the fun part, I think a couple fun things you did outside of covering sports. I do want to ask the cliche question for I know we probably have some people who are uh interested in becoming a journalist in NASCAR, and I always get the question, you know, what can I do? And I never know the right answer. I always just say like just do it, like, kinda at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
you'll figure it out as time goes on. What did you ever get any great advice during kind of your journey that you like to share? Um, Because to me, like, 2 that I
Hmm.
got were, like, just say yes and just do it. It's kind of
Yeah, I
advice.
mean, well, just do it is one of the biggest ones, of just, even if it's your own blog, just write. Whether you want to review video games, just do video game reviews on your own, or whether you want to write about sports, practice writing like recaps for events, you know, practice like transcribing press conferences that you watch and finding what the big key quote in that press conference is. So the doing part is huge. And then also, I mean, another big one is just read. Like, read as much as you can. It does not matter, like, you know, read NASCAR.com, their editorial stuff, read Racer, read The Athletic, read just all these different websites. See everybody's different perspective, because everyone has a different writing voice. They have a different way of approaching different events. So nobody's can tell the same story the exact same way. I mean, like, if you look at my time when I was at NBC, like Dustin Long and I worked side by side every day for a year, but our writing styles are completely different. So the way he may start an intro can be completely different than the way I'll start one. We're going to tell things in a different way. We're going to get the same quote and use a different part of that quote. So, I mean, it just helps to see how other people approach different situations. It helps how you can kind of just build your own voice and make the story you, so you're not just copying someone else's style. I mean, that's a huge thing as well. And then also the one that I love, which I've had a conversation with a lot of people about, is there was a writer for The Athletic. I believe she covers the NBA for The Athletic now, but her name is Gina Mizell. She covered the Beavers for the Oregonian when I was getting started in freelancing. And so my first like college football bullpen, I didn't really know, what I was doing because like that part of college they'd never taught me about bullpens. It was like, hey, here's how you craft a sentence, here's how you don't plagiarize, here's how you take a photo, nothing about what to do in those situations. So she pulled me aside and was just like, here's a couple things, I know it's your first time. You don't have to, but it looks better if you dress professionally with like, a button down shirt and pants, not shorts. That's huge. And then she said, also, I'm going to tell you something that was told to me. Never start a question with talk about. She's like, ask a question, be like, hey, how do you feel about this? What happened here? But never say, talk about your race or talk about this play, because she's like, that's just saying talk about is just a lazy and a hack way to do things. And you're not going to get as good of answers from people if you do it that. And that one's always stuck with me.
Yeah, that's a good way. All right, before we get to what you're doing now, which we've talked about, I have to talk about this. Talked about. No, I'm just kidding. So your career, and you touched on this, and I learned some stuff about you. So
I have a
when you
weird
were
life.
when you're not you're an interesting man. When you didn't work full time in motorsports or as a writer, you
Mhm.
designed signs, and then you also worked at a camp where you basically were their handyman, essentially.
Yes.
Just
So,
what?
well, when I got out of high school, I graduated and I was doing, classes at a community college, but I didn't really know how to go about pursuing this whole writing thing. So I was like, well, for the time being, I'm just going to quit my high school job, which was a fast food restaurant. Shout out Outer Circle. So I was like, I'm just gonna just go get a full-time job and just kind of basically fly by the seat of my pants, which I do not recommend doing. So I started working at a sign shop where a friend worked, so they brought me in as a designer first, to where if you have ever been to Oregon, any like stop sign, freeway sign, street sign, like street name sign, speed sign, all of those different things, I would design them because you have to have the exact like the right heights of fonts. You have to have the exact same type of font because different guidelines based on the state and federal guidelines. And so they also needed someone to build stuff too. So I would design a sign, cut the vinyl, cut the wood or the metal, depending on what it was made out of. And then I'd build the sign and then also sometimes go install them. So there's a few signs in Portland, including one that's like 34 feet long by like 12 feet tall, that I designed, built, and helped install. And it sat there for like, 7 or 8 years until I think a trucker took it out. And that was, I did that for 11 years and then also mixed in some vehicle wrapping stuff. So I also, wrapped like sheriff's cars and helped design those as well. Wrapped like, different vehicles for like dentists, all these different companies. Got to help. I designed and wrapped a giant dump truck, garbage truck. Yeah, it's like a giant garbage truck. I was trying to think of the proper term for it. For like a special parade because that's the town I grew up in. During rodeo week, you did parades with garbage trucks and things. And then my wife was helping out a friend of hers at this campground up in Western Oregon, like up in the mountains. It was like 5,000 foot elevation, nothing around. It's a campground slash RV park built on the side of this lake. And so I was up there helping her. She worked in the front desk area, helping people during, book their places where they're staying, help them get their fishing licenses, all this different stuff. And I worked in the maintenance department. So I'd go during the winter, I'd repair docks, shovel snow, clear paths and stuff like that. And then during the summer, you'd like tow people's boats out to the water for them. You'd pick up garbage from the campgrounds. You'd do maintenance on the different cabins that they had available, little things like replacing light bulbs or staining outside of the cabins to more in-depth work. And we did that for, like a year until I got hired full time by 24/7 Sports. And that was, I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of a blast because you had no cell phone service, no internet. You were just stuck by yourself in the middle of the woods. And it was sweet. And then, yeah, during the summer, it got a little crazy because apparently that lake is the go to spot for kokanee salmon fishing. So there was thousands of people who went there each week.
Fascinating. So you're just a handyman on the side. Like you just can repair some docks. I feel like your honeydew list probably is long during the off season, huh?
Actually, last off season, I did build a shelving unit for our garage that is like 8.5 feet tall and like 10 feet long that can hold a bunch of totes of Christmas stuff.
Smart. All right, let's get to what you're doing now. So fanbuzz.com, Savage Ventures, whatever
Yeah.
you may call it. You joined the team as the senior writer in May 2024.
Mhm.
Basically, you're the only guy covering NASCAR racing in general for them.
Yes.
It is a site you're sort of building from the ground up, if I'm not from from the first time we talked about this. Why did you decide to kind of take this, leave NBC, take this leap of faith, and how would you describe to the people listening what is fanbuzz.com?
So FanBuzz is one of the many websites that Savage Ventures purchased over the last few years. Like they've bought a lot. They own like AmericanSongwriter.com. They just bought Vice and a few other places. And so they purchased FanBuzz, Alt Driver, and then Odometer at the same time. And a guy who I used to work with at CBS called me. Is like, "Hey, how do you feel about basically rebuilding these websites from the ground up?" Because they had all existed in different forms, but they wanted to make them, just streamline them a little bit. So, they have like a couple of guys on the NFL side of FanBuzz, but they needed someone to do NASCAR for both Alt Driver and FanBuzz, kind of depending on what, like the advertisement deals work out, all that stuff that's behind the scenes that's way above my pay grade. So that's why like part of the year we'll have NASCAR articles heavily on Alt Driver, part of the year we'll have them heavily on FanBuzz. Because apparently, part of that process is FanBuzz is better for the back end during the playoffs. So yeah, as of right now, like what we just do is try to build it from some of the past articles before the website got bought were not the most accurate in terms of content on there. Like there were some articles from late 23 that said Kyle Busch was still driving for Joe Gibbs Racing. And then there was a couple that were inaccurate about Dale Sr., which you don't want to have those inaccurate things. So, you like try to build back the reputation of these websites and just make them better and make them more of a trustworthy source for, all the different websites. Like if Google wants to rank it higher, it needs to have actual accurate content plus original reporting plus original interviews and all that fun stuff. And so going back to your other question, why I took that leap is like I loved working at NBC. I loved working with Dustin. I loved working with Nate Ryan. Like they were awesome. But I wanted to do a lot of like just coverage across all the different series where like with the different, you know, hourly budget, all that different stuff, it wasn't possible to cover all of the different series as much, like the truck series or ARCA or, IndyCar or whatever it may be, just because of there's only so many hours in a week. And so when there's like just you three guys, they want you kind of focused on Xfinity and Cup because those are like the bigger name drivers, the bigger races, all of those different things. And so there was times where I wanted to do like some interviews but I just couldn't because of, scheduling purposes, because I couldn't fit in like, hey, we're going to cover the Roval this race, but I can't also interview this truck series driver because it just doesn't, the
Gotcha.
timelines just don't work. And so it was a opportunity to kind of just like, I guess, pick and choose what like really big stories I wanted to pursue, which interviews I wanted to pursue, and kind of just try to see how I can make it work. And plus, it's just a fun challenge, just being like, hey, can I build this into something successful?
Well, good luck. Being the second best motorsports site behind us, of course.
Dang.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, that's a little bit about John Newby. If you're scared, I'm sorry. If not, realize how good of a guy he is. Always been nice to me. Nice to us at Front Stretch. Figured we'd give him. I said I'd go 15 minutes with him, but he's such a good guy. We went 30 minutes, which that
Yeah.
happened. That
I'm
happens.
impressed I kept it under an hour.
Hey, we do our best. I have to keep this podcast under an hour. I get in trouble from Tom Bolt. So follow him at John Newby _. We will now head back to me and Caleb with What's Still Hot. So thanks, John Newby, for heading into the Inferno. And we'll be back in a second.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much to John for spending some time with us. Really great conversation. Hope you learned something about him. We appreciate all the times he comes on to Happy Hour. But, you know, on that podcast, we're talking the latest hot takes. And it's hard to really actually know about these people and their journeys. So that's why we're giving you a little bit of insight to them, because we're very grateful for they spend an hour, especially now that you have to spend an hour with Brian Nolan. So that's that's even more difficult. Just kidding, Brian. I do love you, despite you like to send me random pieces of mail every week, or at least this week. But let's skip past that and let's get to the latest news and notes with What's Still Hot.
What's Still Hot? It's time to upgrade you on the latest news in NASCAR.
What's Still Hot? Joining me now is Caleb Barnes at Caleb Barnes _ helps me produce Happy Hour as well as co-host for me most weeks. Caleb, glad you're here. Let's dive right into this. Denny Hamlin's pit crew penalized for the wheel coming off at Bristol, but they are deferring the suspension to start next week and keep it at so that would be at Kansas and the Roval. Ultimately, right choice to maybe put more eggs in the basket of winning at New Hampshire or having a really good New Hampshire, and less eggs into the Roval basket where it might not fit Denny's skill set the best.
Yeah, it's kind of a rock between a hard place scenario, because if anything, I think Denny and his team would rather have the whole group put together for the Kansas race. But I guess you got to choose between New Hampshire or the Roval, and yeah, certainly New Hampshire will be a better option for versus Denny's road course racing skills. Not that he's horrible at it, but he said a couple times he doesn't like. He's not a huge fan of the ovals. He prefers the roundy rounds, as I think he calls it. So I think, looking ahead of this weekend, Christopher Bell is going to be the one to beat. I think just his track record at New Hampshire, both in the Xfinity side and the Cup Series, I think that 20 car is going to be one to beat. But, Denny has run well. He has wins at New Hampshire before, and he's in that Joe Gibbs racing team, which they seem to have fast cars to start the playoffs. So there's no telling. Maybe it will pay off, and maybe he will be able to usurp his teammates at New Hampshire. But definitely it makes sense to defer the penalty, because I think he's basically the Roval. Not only is it a Denny Hamlin thing, but also the pit crew. Like, they do matter at all these racetracks, but I feel like things get so much more spread out at the Roval or at road courses that you can afford a couple tenths here and there as long as there's no major issues, because track position does matter. But it's a little bit different there versus if you have a major issue at New Hampshire or I guess Kansas wasn't on the table. So it does make sense. We'll see if it pays off for him this weekend.
Ultimately, we're going to talk a different aspect of Bristol, the Bowman side of things, for the soundbite of the week. But one soundbite we could use is the driver's reactions to the tires. We got the tire wear that we saw a few years ago when I was at that race with Michael Massey and Alex Gintz, the spring race in 2024, where it was mayhem and it was kind of shocking. And I was reacting to it live with Mike Neff and Brian Nolan on the watch party. Ultimately, what did you think? Was this too far, just enough, or too gimmicky has been tossed around? Where do you stand on the tire wear and how it affected the race we saw on Saturday night?
I wouldn't say it's gimmicky. I think it's really just sort of a Hail Mary with short tracks in this car and trying to make something so that the product isn't just stagnant and stale like it has been for the most part for the last couple of years with this next gen car. So, in my opinion, I'm not a huge fan of it. Now, it is very entertaining to watch, but I know we keep classifying it as tire wear, but as far as tire wear goes, it's more like it gets so far and then just it's like a ticking time bomb. It's gonna get to the cords eventually. And I know they're talking about drivers can do some things here and there to manage it. And they talk about the crews. If the crews have a heads up to be able to go in, they can possibly set things up to manage it better as well. But I just think at least from what we've seen so far, it's been so unpredictable that I don't think the crews are willing to take a bunch of setup gambles to bank on more tire wear. And then you have something like Spring Bristol this year where they were expecting it after practice, and then it didn't happen in the race. So I think it's too unpredictable. It's almost too chaotic for my liking. It kind of, in my opinion, makes it feel a little bit more like super speedway races where like the big one can happen at any time and take out guys. And same thing with the tires just go flat in such a hurry, or not flat. I guess they get down to the cords in such a hurry, and that can have such an impact on guys, whether it's someone off the pace in front of the leaders, whether it's the leaders suddenly getting off the pace and getting run over. And again, it did make it entertaining because you had actually some action and passing and a little bit of carnage that we've become used to seeing with Bristol. But I feel like it's almost slightly too chaotic instead of like finding a happy medium in there. But I just go back to, I think it just continues to show the car problem, and we're just trying to subsidize that with massive extreme tire wear.
Well, a guy who we thought at one point had a shot to win and upset the apple card was Alex Bowman. He becomes our focus for the soundbite of the week.
Well, Tony, what angered you at the end of the race? What did you take issue with?
What the hell do you think I was mad about? Dumb little runs us clear down to the infield. He wants to about everybody else, and he's the one that drives like a little. I'm gonna bust his ass.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
And short track races.
It's time for the sound bites of the week.
I thought our car, when we had some green flag running, was really good. It just cycled really poorly for restarts. So I would drive off into turn one and just hope to make the corner. For whatever reason, it just wouldn't take off. And then after 5 laps or so, it would go again. And I couldn't figure it out if it was something that I was doing, not cleaning the tires off enough. But I felt like I was cleaning the tires off too much at some point, so I don't really know what we lacked there. But just proud of everybody at Hendrick Motorsports for the fight. Obviously had a shot at it if it would have gone green to the end, but it didn't. And yeah, the last restart was ugly, but yeah, good Ally Camaro compared to yesterday. Made some gains on it. Still have some gains we need to make.
How do you turn the final 7 races into a positive?
Well, I think just tonight, kind of getting back on the right foot a little bit and not finishing 35th is a step in the right direction. You know, a top 10 with stage points and a solid day. The guys on pit road did a really good job. I'm sure the guys on the 77 did a good job too. Those guys are like family, so it's been a rough week, but yeah, just got to keep digging, right? There's a lot of points we can still score. We can still, finish way better than wherever we're at in points right now.
So there you have it. Alex Bowman finishes 8th. He gets eliminated in the first round after a pretty lackluster first round outside of Bristol. There were points in that race where he thought Alex Bowman had a real shot to win. He ultimately finishes 8th. Do you think, Caleb, and this may be extreme, that Alex Bowman has cost himself his ride with the 48 team? Or do you think they'll give him one more year?
I feel like it's too early to say. Then again, I don't know what rumors are floating out there right now. I know people have social media has been putting Alex Bowman on the hot seat for quite a while. I don't know that it's quite time in the mind of Mr. Hendrick, but at the same time, it just feels like this year there's not a ton of major free agents out there. Whereas I believe there's a lot more driver contracts kind of coming up next year, and that could be a sort of thing. The only way I could see Bowman getting ousted is kind of depending on how this lawsuit stuff goes, and if Hendrick tried to maybe snag Reddick or somebody out of the 2311 or FRM camp. But at the same time, I don't know that I see that happening either. I feel like Hendrick, Bowman, and Ally all kind of have a pretty solid thing going right now, and it hasn't gone like horror. It wasn't like a horrible, awful season. It just was a slightly below. There are times when Bowman was running well, and times when he just wasn't absent, but he was just kind of out there, So I don't think he's quite cost himself yet, but I think it might be coming soon if he can't get things turned around next year.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Reddick seems the only viable option. Do they go like a Daniel Suarez? I don't see it. I mean, can they poach one of the big Chevy up and comers in like a a Carson Hocevar. I don't see it. So just something to keep in mind. All right, one more thing to do. Let's wrap it up with the checkered flag.
It's going to be a drag race all the way back to the start-finish line. No caution. They're side by side, right to the line. Big crash. Here they come. Checkered flag.
The checkered flag is out, and it's time for the final thoughts.
Final thought. Anything you want to rant, rave, or review? Checkered flag's out. Caleb Barnes, what do you want to talk about?
Sure. I was going back and forth on what to talk about. There's a lot of things with the lawsuit and the gold codes that kind of came out over the weekend. But I think what's been on my mind is I don't know how often you're on TikTok, Trey, but I keep getting these sports edits, and sports edits are great. I love them. I have to watch like every single one. But the best ones and some of the most popular ones are focused around a certain racing character named Lightning McQueen. And there's some really epic sports edits. And it's had me thinking the last couple of weeks, like, how is there a way that NASCAR could still capitalize on the popularity of cars? Because that movie came out in 2006? Is that the year it came out? And it was such a popular movie whenever it came out. And then just as a lot of the kids are growing up and becoming adults, they still love and look back on this movie with all sorts of nostalgia. And it feels like one of those movies that's going to live on for a lot longer and be remembered by a lot more people. And there's all these people that there's such a cool factor with cars. And I know NASCAR is talking about going back to its roots and all those marketing campaigns. And I feel like that's the wrong way to go. Like, I feel like there's this market out there of people who like race cars. They like Formula One for a reason, but there's such a cool aspect to NASCAR. And a lot of these people, especially in America, have had that affinity with Lightning McQueen and some of those characters since they were little. So I guess I don't really have any ideas to bring to the table. I just was putting that out there, that I see all these awesome, crazy TikTok edits that people put together, and they get hundreds of thousands of likes, and people are wanting a Cars 4 to come out, and there's a Lego car set, and there's all sorts of popularity around the movie Cars. And I hope NASCAR didn't miss the boat with capitalizing on its popularity, and maybe there's an audience out there, a way to bring in some fans, basically hooking on nostalgia from a Disney movie.
Interesting. Did not expect you to go that route.
out of nowhere.
Oh, but interesting. Cars is a great movie. Shout out to Cars. I'm just give a shout out to Corey Haim, man. He finished 6th at Bristol this past weekend, and this is the second time he is finished as the lead 2311 driver, and 2 of those cars are in the playoffs. So I think there's a real debate between Connor Zilisch and Corey Haim as the number 1 prospect in NASCAR. I think you just have to view him as 1A, 1B. But boy, oh boy, did Corey Haim, on a night where you had to use a lot of driver skill, and you would think his youth would be a hindrance to him. He still gets and strategy probably fell his way, but he gets a sixth place finish. So shout out to Corey Haim. But that will do it. Are you reading Caleb? Are you reading the lawsuit stuff this week, or are you just doing Stock Car Scoop?
I'm just doing Stock Car Scoop. I will be on the road visiting my brother in college, so I'll be helping
true.
out.
I know you're going to be here in Lynchburg, so that
Yeah.
I knew that. Anyways, so it's I just saw the 6'7" joke you made in the private chat. So 6'7", yeah, whatever that means. These kids. All right. You can listen to Stock Car Scoop. Also listen to Through the Gears on the Farm Stretch Podcast Network. Our guy Wyatt Watson with the best bets for the race at New Hampshire. Quickly before we get on out of here, let's quickly do a prediction, because everyone does these. Next 4 eliminated in the playoffs.
Ooh, that is a good question. Honestly, this might be a hot take, might not. I feel like Chase Elliott, and even go back to the couple of weeks before, I feel like he's in a lot of danger to get eliminated. I feel like, man, really all the guys. So I would move Bubba Wallace up. He's in 8th, right on the cut line. But then Chase Elliott, and then the 4 guys below, I think those are the guys in most danger. I don't know if we'll see a surprise from Byron Larson, but I think Elliott gets cut. I know people are going to say he's good at road courses, but he just hasn't been great the last month or so. I think Cindric makes it through. I think he surprises some people and gets to the round of 8. I'll go with Logano and Chastain getting cut. I know Chastain won Kansas last year, but he also has just kind of been mediocre. So I've got Tyler Reddick and Austin Cindric moving on from below the cut line, and yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So my picks, I agree with you about Bubba Wallace. I think he's going to advance. I just think I honestly think the 45 is going to advance. I think you have to say the 22. I'm going to say the 2, the 22, the 9, and the 1. That will be my 4.
It's not an even year, so Logano he's not going to get the same DQ luck bonus this year at the Roval.
So, all right, for Caleb Barnes, I'm Trey Lyle signing off for now. Bye, everybody.